The Path to 2409 is a multimedia extended timeline detailing the history of the Star Trek universe, starting in 2379, just after the events of Star Trek Nemesis, running through to the 2409 setting of the video game Star Trek Online. Overview. Edit. The Path began as a series of web pages on the Star Trek Online website, launching with 2379 2380 in August 2008. Each subsequent page detailed the events of 1 year, with roughly monthly releases taking the timeline up to 2392 by September of 2009. Updates then halted until March 2010, when the entire 23,792,408 timeline was published in a shorter summary format in the STOD novel The Needs of the Many. March also marked the start of The Path being published in the Star Trek magazine. Several years in summary format, slightly longer than the novel edition, were published together per issue, with accompanying illustrations. So far 3 parts of this edition have been published, taking the timeline as far as 2395. On May 2010, full-length updates had begun to be published once again on the STO website. With the years 23,932,409 all published in May and early June, in December 2011 the website was taken down and the Path story was broken down into 29 volumes of accolades that can be collected and earned in the game. The timeline begins describing many events inspired by pocketbook Star Trek novels. However, the chronological placements are often adjusted and details have been changed. The timeline does not incorporate events from the most recent entries into the prose continuity, such as the Star Trek Destiny trilogy and related publications. It does, however, incorporate ideas from the Star Trek Countdown comic series. As the timeline has progressed away from the era, any novels are set in more original ideas have been added, with the story eventually leading up to a state of war between the United Federation of Planets and the Klingon Empire at the time the game will be set. The timeline of The Path to 2409 and other STODs has been confirmed as an alternate timeline to that Destiny timeline in both the real world, with Star Trek magazine articles detailing events as both timelines, and in universe, as described in the STO novel The Needs of the Many. It should be noted that as of the most current storyline details in the game, circa October 2014, and the year 2410 in GOM. Various points from the original Path to 2409 pages and even The Needs of the Many have been revised or contradicted outright, including details regarding the character of 7 of 9 and others. The most accurate source of lore for the game is located in the game itself as part of a detailed historical account of history from 2380 onwards. Summary. Edit. 2379-2380 Edit. Romulan space is in political disarray, with factions led by Dinatra and Taliara at odds and the Remans demanding increased freedoms and rights. In Federation space, the USS Enterprise is repaired and relaunched on its mission of exploration, while half the crew is reassigned in the months-long refit, including those who now serve on the USS Titan. The female changeling is put on trial and detained at the maximum security facility on Anang Alpha for her crimes in the Dominion War. And Rolaran is also tried for defecting to the Maquis a decade earlier and is sent for rehabilitation on Earth. On Cardassia, Keiko O'Brien leads the Agricultural Anzac Project, which is opposed by xenophobic groups such as the True and Gul Moset Conservative Bloc, but supported by the likes of Alan Garrick. Memory Alpha predicts that without more similar projects the Cardassian Union could fall in 3 years. 2381 Edit. In Romulan space, Taliara struggles to maintain control of the Empire. Reman ships continually skirmish with Romulan forces, leading to forces under the command of Tomalak forming a blockade, with the Empire's military might subsequently stretched thin. Dinatra rallies military forces, loyal to her, to conquer several agricultural worlds and form a new breakaway state, the Imperial Romulan State, in opposition to the Star Empire under the leadership of Taliara. Elsewhere, the Jor leads a coalition of worlds demanding Cardassian officials stand trial for war crimes in the occupation of the Joran Dominion War. With an increase in Borg activity, it is feared a new Borg Queen might have been created, and Jean-Luc Picard is appointed to lead the defense against any new attack. He calls on 7 of 9 to research technology brought back by the USS Voyager to give the Federation an advantage. Starfleet also continues its efforts in exploration, though, with the launch of the USS Stargazer A member of a new class of starship designed for research and exploration. 2382 Edit. Tensions continue to rise between the Romulan Star Empire and Imperial State. Taliara reluctantly accepts Federation aid after Denatra's control over key agricultural world stretches the Star Empire's resources. Meanwhile, Taliara reforms the Romulan political system to give her direct control over the makeup of the Senate, irritating traditional Romulan noble families who lose some of their previous status. The Romulan situation also spurs Spock and the Unificationists to take the opportunity to assert their power and push for representation in the new Senate and recognition and support of the movement by the Federation. While at the edges of Romulan space, the Klingons take advantage of the weakened state and reclaim a number of disputed worlds, including Khadimir. In the Federation, Admiral Owen Paris of Starfleet Research and Development orders the Doctor's mobile emitter be taken for study, a decision which is contested by the Doctor, and in the vicinity of Bajor tensions rise when several hundred Cardassians Bajor hope to pursue for war crimes vanish, prompting Bajor to accuse Cardassia of putting them into hiding. Finally, Rolaren completes her time in Federation custody and returns to Bajor, where she assumes the role of Chief of Security on Deep Space Nine. 2383 At 2383 see the state of Romulan space continue to crumble as the Star Empire and Imperial state persist in fighting among themselves. Next-door relations between the Federation and Klingon Empire also suffer as both sides react badly to the consequences of the Klingons taking control of Khadimir. Meanwhile, in the Cardassian Union, the unearthing of new Hibishan findings spurs the Orleans into more public displays of their faith. Back in the Federation, members of the Soong Foundation begin work on producing new mobile holographic emitters, while the Federation's lawyers continue to debate the rights of the Doctor to retain the use of his own. 2384 Edit As Romulan space continues on the path to civil war, Taliara replaces Tomalek with Sela as her proconsul following a defeat by the Imperial Romulan state. With the Star Empire unable to support itself, Taliara reluctantly agrees to open negotiations between the two Romulan states, but is assassinated shortly after. Outside of Romulan space, the Klingons close down diplomatic relations with the Gorn following an attack, apparently unsanctioned, by a Gorn ship on the Archaeus Cove. In the Federation, there is celebration as Bajor restarts on a fast-track admission to the Federation, before is transferred to the custody of the Soong Foundation, who hope to restore him to full functionality. And on Corliss 3, Odo, now serving as the Great Link's ambassador to the Solids, meets with Laz to invite him back to the Great Link. Laz refuses, wishing to continue a search for changelings in the Alpha and Beta Quadrant. 2385 Added in part of a Starfleet reassessment of resources, the Enterprise is reassigned to exploration missions and undergoes an extensive refit. At the request of the Federation President, Captain Picard resigns from Starfleet to take up an ambassadorial position on Vulcan. Dr. Crusher accepts command of the USS Pasteur. Geordie LaForge works with the Soong Foundation to unlock the data matrix and before allowing Data to be restored by asserting his persona over Before's. Worf leaves Starfleet again to make use of his diplomatic skills once more on Canis in light of the increasing tensions between the Klingon Empire and the Federation. Elsewhere in Starfleet, much to the dismay of Annika Hansen, Starfleet Command decides to dismantle its Borg task force, believing the Borg threat to be minimal following the blow dealt to them by the USS Voyager on their way home. In Romulan space, years of near-civil war are brought to an uneasy end with an agreement that folds the worlds of the recently founded Imperial Romulan state back into the Romulan Star Empire. Senator Chulin is chosen as the new praetor, but much of the power in the Empire sits with Denatra, who maintains control of the military and extends a hand of friendship to the Remans, offering them full citizenship and representation in the Senate. While both sides accept the new peace, many Romulans continue to treat the Remans as second-class citizens. In this year, 7 of 9 gave an interview. The topics of this discussion ranged from her still present implants to the fact the Borg were still a threat which had not been encountered since the USS Voyager's return. Interview with Annika Hansen. Edit in this year, an interview was conducted with Annika Hansen. Hansen conveyed her general disdain at Starfleet policy towards the Borg, citing the dismantling of the Borg task force as her reason for resigning from Starfleet service, and moving to the Daystrom Institute to try and further development of Borg defenses. 2386 Edit in the Romulan Star Empire, an investigation by the Romulan Mining Guild concludes that the continued overtaxation of Remus could result in a precise-like end to the planet and suggest Romulan mining effects spread to further reaches of the Empire. This suggestion puts the Guild at odds with the Remans, with vessels of both sides occasionally clashing for control of more distant mining worlds. The Remans also continue to fight for greater rights, requesting a continent to live on Romulus. That request is rejected, and instead the Remans are offered the planet Craterus, the site of a failed Romulan colony, but a vast improvement over Remus. Meanwhile, Reheka the Talshir concludes his investigation into the assassination of Taliara, finding she was killed by a coalition of noble houses who had been enraged by her reformation of the Senate. This report sparked a feud between Rehek and Sela, eventually leading to attack on Rehek's home, killing him and his family. Sela is sentenced to death. But Dinatra steps in to arrange for Sela to be exiled rather than killed. Later in the year, Admiral Taris takes her ship to Laveri V to investigate claims that the Sword of the Raptor Star, a revered artifact from the time of the Sundering, had been discovered. Outside of Romulan space, relations between the Klingons and Gorn continue to degrade. Following the death of the Gorn king, his successor, Slathis, acts to reinforce the borders with the Klingon Empire, resulting in an escalation of forces on both sides of the border, and eventually a successful attack by the Klingons on Gila 4, away from the field of battle. Worf marries his new partner Grilka. With many of his old Starfleet comrades in attendance. In Starfleet, the refit of the USS Enterprise is completed, with command awarded to Data, and Starfleet introduces a new uniform design. Meanwhile, on Ferenginar, protests rage for 2 days after Rom introduces free schooling using tax revenues. The protests are brought to an end when Rom introduces a scheme requiring a permit to protest, using the funding from said permits to fund the new education system. In neighboring Cardassian space, a new agreement is reached between the Union and the Federation to disband Cardassia's military, instead allowing Starfleet to maintain security and concentrate resources in rebuilding Cardassia. The new agreement prompts the Bajoran coalition to drop its call to charge Cardassians for war crimes in recent conflicts. Finally, on behalf of the founders, Odo meets with Lemeducan, the leader of the Jem'Hadar in the Alpha Quadrant, to request they return to the Gamma Quadrant. Lemeducan rejects Odo as a false god, and refuses to return with him. Account of the attack on Gila vetted in this year. An interview was conducted with former Starfleet officer David Steiner following the attack on Gila 4. Steiner had retired from Starfleet following the Dominion War and made a new life as a freighter pilot. With the recent increased tensions between the Gorn and Klingons, the Gorn had been stockpiling materials and equipment in preparation for war, and Steiner had traveled to Gila to sell them some Verterium Cortnide. There he found himself stuck in the middle of a war zone when the Klingons launched their attack. Steiner deferred to his Starfleet training and volunteered to help with evacuation. After his third run, his ship was shot down, crash landing in the desert. With few supplies left, he and the evacuees were forced to walk to the nearest, by then Klingon-occupied settlement. There the Gorn were held in custody while Steiner, as a Federation citizen, was free to leave. 2387 added on stardate 64163. 8 Hassan the Undying assassinates top Orion Syndicate boss Remus. Remus's death allows Hassan's employer, Melanidian, to take over Remus's syndicate operations. Starfleet intelligence estimates that Melanidian subsequently controls more than 30% of the syndicate's operations, which might provoke other syndicate bosses to act against her before she expands her power base further. Dian is also notably the first Orion in 20 years to gain a top spot in the syndicate's leadership, leading to speculation that the Orions may be returning as an interstellar power. On Ferenginar, Grand Nagus Rom presents a bill to the Economic Congress of Ferengi advisors that would formally ally the Ferengi with the Federation. The bill fails to pass due to bribes being paid to vote against it. Starfleet sends a fleet to Cardassia to assist the Cardassians in the dismantling of their military and establish Starfleet's role as Cardassia's protectors. The new arrangement is soon tested when Alpha Gem had to take control of Devos 2 and established a Ketrisal-wide production facility. Starfleet sends the Stargazer A to Devos but chooses not to act against the Jem'Hadar so long as they make no further aggressive moves. On stardate 64317.6. Klingon long-range sensors pick up a small Romulan fleet led by Sela passing the Beta Stromgrim supernova remnant out into unexplored space. On stardate 64333.4, a Romulan mining guild ship observes massive fluctuations on the star Hobus. Days later, Ambassador Spock appears before the Romulan Senate to warn them about the dangers of the star and its impending supernova. He asks the Senate to work with the Vulcans to find a solution to stop what he believes could be the start of a chain reaction leading to the destruction of Romulus when the star goes nova. The Senate refuses his proposal. After the Senate session, Colonel Giomek invites Dinatra to visit the Reman colony on Craterus. After meetings at the colony, in which they discuss rogue elements in the Empire, Dinatra and Giomek return to Romulus, but report unusual stellar activity, and a disturbance equivalent to a 4-7 ion storm en route. Contact with the Valdor is lost. Romulus dispatches 4 Derrid X-class warbirds to search for the Valdor. Meanwhile, Spock returns to Vulcan, where he meets with Ambassador Jean-Luc Picard. The two appeal to the Vulcan Science Academy to assist the Romulans with the Hobus crisis, but the Vulcans refuse to help. The two former Starfleet officers decide to take things into their own hands and ask Geordi LaForge to bring the recently launched experimental starship Jellyfish to Vulcan so that Spock can use it to deliver red matter to the Hobus star to create a black hole to negate its effects. On Romulus, the Senate finally authorizes an evacuation order, and ships are recalled to help ferry Romulus residents off-world. The military estimates it will take 6 weeks to evacuate the planet, and a mere 27 hours later, the Hobus star goes supernova. The resulting chain reaction destroys Romulus and Remus, and billions of Romulans are killed. Starfleet immediately orders all available ships to cross the neutral zone and assist the Romulans. Several of these ships are attacked by Nero, in command of a heavily modified mining vessel, the Narada. Additional cruisers are subsequently diverted to escort relief vessels in Romulan space. After Nero expands his attacks to Klingon ships, Chancellor Marduk orders a fleet to enter Romulan space. He appoints his friend Worf as one of the mission's commanders, making him a general for the mission. On stardate 64471, 6, the USS Enterprise observes the Hobus supernova being contained by a limited singularity, ending the threat to the quadrant. Starfleet believes that both the Jellyfish and the Narada were also lost to the singularity. Interview with Sharon. Edit in this year, an interview was conducted with Sharon, former commander of the warbird IRW Sutterus and now a farmer on Talbith, which following the Hobus incident petition for Federation protection. Sharon talked to the interviewer about his former associate Dinatra, and those related to her. The former praetor Taliara, and how the death of Brig fired a passion in Dinatra that probably resulted in her rise to Empress. Even though Dinatra is missing and presumed dead due to the effects of the Hobus supernova, Sharon believes she lives on. 2388 Edit. Following the destruction of Romulus, the Star Empire is in disarray, the Senate destroyed and Dinatra missing. The Leadership Council of Raider 3 declares itself the new Senate, and Raider 2 the new capital, but is quickly challenged by similar claims from the leaders of Achener Prime and Abraxas. One possible leader for the people, Admiral Taris, decides to concentrate her efforts on evaluating what remains of the Romulan military, recalling all Romulan ships to Romulan space. While the Romulan politicians fight among themselves, the Federation does its best to supply aid to refugees and survivors, but finds itself faced with variable responses from Romulan colony worlds. With some welcoming the aid while others only suspect the Federation of trickery or warfare, the Federation finds the balance particularly hard to keep in respect to the worlds vying for power over the Empire, treading carefully so not to give any preferential treatment. The Federation's allies also assist in the relief effort, even Cardassia, which is still struggling with its own rebuilding. The Klingons however refuse, with Marduk declaring, "The Klingons will offer no treaty, no aid, and no hand that is not holding a blade." Within the Empire there are accusations the fleet led by Worf to try and stop Nero may have been sabotaged by Worf, working for the Federation, to try and weaken the Empire. Marduk rejects the claims and issues a standing challenge to anyone who dares insult the honor of a member of the House of Marduk. Relations between the Klingons and Federation do however remain tense, at their weakest since the Klingons withdrew from the Khitomer Accords in 2372. In contrast, relations between the Klingons and Orion strengthen as the two races consider a treaty. A delegation of Orions led by Melanidian open talks with the Klingons and Labrine, seeking assistance. Having noted their homeworld in the Rigel system has suffered severe natural resource depletion, and the Starfleet crackdown on syndicate operations is hindering their people, Melanie offers the possibility of Orion support and access to ancient Orion knowledge and treasures, but does not commit to either side until they make offers in return. Meanwhile, Countess Worf recuperates from his injuries and fulfills his duties as Federation ambassador to the Klingon Empire. On stardate 65548.43, he witnesses the birth of his second son, Ktin. On stardate 65776.64, the Federation News Network reports that the Vulcan Science Academy knew of the threat of the Hova supernova, but refused to assist the Romulans in preventing the destruction of Romulus. The news causes an immediate outcry, with the Vulcans condemned by politicians and analysts and 17 independent planets, plus the Federation members Pacifica and Zarin too, recalling their ambassadors to Vulcan. 2 days later the Federation Council votes to open an investigation into the Vulcans' refusal to help, and the implications of the Academy's work with red matter. President Bako makes a public appeal for member worlds to remain calm and not to ostracize the Vulcans. In this time of strife we need to remain united. Assigning blame does not heal the injured, soothe the stricken or comfort the grieving. 2389 Edit infighting continues among the leaders of the Romulan colony worlds, while basic needs are being met and Starfleet is delivering supplies and replicators to every world that will accept their help. The Romulans lack a stable government and the chain of command of the military is chaotic. Throughout the course of 2389, 5 Romulans try to seize the Emperor's throne. More than 24 people declare themselves praetor, and at least a dozen more claim the role of Supreme Commander of the Romulan fleet. Most of these erstwhile leaders fall prey to quick assassinations. A fortunate few are simply ignored. Federation analysts agree that the Romulan Empire will remain in turmoil until there is a leader who is able to command the allegiance of the majority of the colony worlds. Federation diplomatic teams attempt to organize a conference where representatives from each of the colony worlds can take the first steps to establishing a new government and choosing leaders. But the Romulans cannot even agree on where the meeting should be held and the plan collapses. The Klingon Empire takes advantage of the confusion with lightning strikes into Romulan space. The Empire takes control of the Tridom Sar and Nequentia systems in a matter of days, and is poised to strike deeper into Romulan territory. The Klingons temporarily halt their advance when Starfleet sends a fleet to protect the Romulan-Klingon border. But tensions remain high and there are reports of minor skirmishes between Federation and Klingon starships. The campaign to conquer Romulan space is not the only military conflict the Klingon Empire is engaged in during 2389. Their conflict with the Gorn, which had quieted after the battle for Gila 4, erupts again when the two powers struggle for control of the Gamma Oriana system. The Gorn take the advantage when King Slathis negotiates with the Nausicaans, who agree to contribute ships and weapons to the Gorn war efforts in exchange for rights to several asteroid belts and a substantial payment. The Klingons refuse to give up the fight for Gamma Orionis, winning several battles even when outnumbered, and Starfleet intelligence reports that there are no signs that the conflict will end anytime soon. In addition, internal strife divides the Klingon noble houses. On stardate 66091.53, Akin of the House of Mogai slays Gtuz, son of Vat. The death reignites a century-long blood feud between the two houses, and Vat throws all his efforts into hunting down every member of the House of Mogai. Allies of both of the noble families enter into the fight, but in the end, Akin is the last of his house. After Akin flees Kaunas, he is run to ground by agents of the House of Vat, who corner him on Eotoria on stardate 66306.71. 2 days later, Vat defeats Akin in ritual combat, and Chancellor Marduk formally dissolves the House of Mogai. The Cardassians take a major step toward self-sufficiency when they vote to replace the Reconstruction Committee with democratic all-elected leaders. In the weeks leading up to the election, 2 groups dominate the debate, a civilian coalition with Elim Garak as a prominent member, and a hardliner group calling for the Cardassians to withdraw from the Federation Cardassian Treaty of 2386 and re-establish the military. Garak's coalition wins a narrow victory, and in its first act reforms the Datopic Council as a representative body. The council faces its first controversy when it votes to send 6 ships as a token force to assist the Federation's recovery efforts in Romulan space. Popular opinion is against the decision, and polls show that most Cardassians feel that they should reserve their resources the Federation Council's decision to cut funding for Kardashian reconstruction by 30% makes aid to the Romulans even less popular, and support for the council plummets. Speaking to reporters from the shattered remains of the University of Quillette, Ellen Garrick defended the Detapa Council's actions. "We've seen what suspicion and backroom deals have brought us," Garrick said. "We know what happens when we turn our backs on the rest of the galaxy and just worry about what happens on our own street, in our own city, on our own planet. Maybe it's time to try something different." One of the first industries to be restarted in Kardashian space is mining. A former member of the military, Gil Martrade, acquires the rights to several mineral-rich planetoids and begins building a large mining operation in the Septimus system. Federation President Nani DeBecco focuses for much of 2389 on smoothing relations between Vulcan and the other worlds of the Federation. She and Ambassador Jean-Luc Picard do much to soothe the wounds caused by the revelation that the Vulcans may have known about the Hova supernova. On stardate 66839.72, the Federation Council announces the results into an investigation of the Hova supernova and the Vulcan Science Academy's research into red matter manipulation. The Council decides that the Vulcans may not have realized the full extent of the threat of the Hova supernova, as the scope of the explosion was greater and more violent than any supernova previously recorded. In addition, the chain reaction of the detonation could not have been predicted, and the Council recommends that the matter be subjected to further scientific study. However, the Council criticizes the Vulcan Science Academy for creating red matter without consulting or informing Federation authorities. In a speech before the Federation Council, Councillor Gloza Vulcan expresses regret if any of the actions or inactions of her people have caused harm to the Federation. She announces that all of the Academy's red matter was on board the jellyfish when it disappeared, and that the Vulcan Science Academy has pledged to do no further red matter manipulation research, without the full knowledge and cooperation of the Federation Science Council. To the Romulans, she directs a single statement: "We grieve with thee." At the end of her address, Klo says that it is only logical to change who speaks for Vulcan, as the past year has made it clear that she has been inadequate to the task. She resigns from the Federation Council and returns home. In the courts, the case of the photonic lithoform known as the Doctor makes a small advancement after years of being stalled in hearings and appeals. On stardate 66954.79, a Federation judge rules that the lawsuit may be expanded into a class action suit encompassing all sentient artificial lithoforms in the Federation. "This is about more than one being and a mobile emitter," says Alyssa Cogley-Shaw, a lawyer for the Soon Foundation. "This is about basic rights." Cogley-Shaw says that while the expansion of the lawsuit may mean that it will remain tangled in the courts for years to come, its ultimate resolution may mean an end to the forced servitude of more than 600 EMH I holograms. And, as Starfleet re-equips more of its starships with holoprojectors to expand the usefulness of photonic tools such as the emergency command and emergency medical holograms, someday those lithoforms may be considered Starfleet officers with all of the rights and privileges of their rank. 2390 edit rates on civilian ships and settlements along the borders of the Klingon Empire and Gorn hegemony rise dramatically, and Starfleet identifies at least 8 places near the borders where the Nausicans are constructing bases hidden in asteroid belts or nebulae. Starfleet Command does not consider these bases to be a major threat, but the Federation Transport Union, which represents a large number of civilian freighter captains, is demanding that Starfleet increase its patrols in the border regions and offer additional protections for civilian shipping traffic. This puts Starfleet in a position of having to balance the need for defense with the Federation's deteriorating relationship with the Klingon Empire. More starships on the border will be seen as a hostile act by the hardliners on the Klingon High Council. And tensions are already high because of the ships that Starfleet is using to reinforce the Romulan border with the Klingon Empire. The debate on what to do rages for much of the year, and the few Starfleet vessels that are assigned to the region are stretched thin and struggling to deal with the swift raider attacks. By the time a starship can respond to a distress signal, it is often too late to catch the Nausicaan ships. The best-case scenario for the Federation, analysts agree, is if the Klingon and Gorn find a peaceful solution before the conflict has a chance to engulf nearby worlds. To this end, the Federation offers to mediate talks between the Gorn and the Klingons at a neutral location. Neither party is overeager to accept human meddling in a personal dispute, and preliminary talks to hash out the details of the peace conference drag on for weeks. The process comes to an abrupt halt when Chancellor Marduk announces that the Klingons will not participate unless Starfleet withdraws all of its ships from the Romulan-Klingon border. While the campaigns against the Romulans and the Gorn are both extremely popular on Kaunas, projections by the Klingon Defense Force show that the Empire's resources are being stretched thin by a 12-front war. The KDF recommends a rapid increase in ship production, eliminating some of the blocks to non-commissioned soldiers rising to the rank of officer and possibly scaling back the Romulan war in the short term, because the disorganized, displaced Romulans are not an immediate threat. Ultimately, the Klingons decide to slow their advance into Romulan space, but they continue to garrison and defend the territory gained in the 2389 campaign. The Romulan colony worlds are starting to develop a loose network of alliances and rivalries, but none of the potential Romulan leaders has been able to unify the world under one banner. Left to their own devices, some of the worlds are looking to find allies outside the Romulan Star Empire. On stardate 67620.54, the Romulan colony of Talvith formally requests Federation protection and offers to open talks that could lead to Talvith applying for Federation membership. Some see this as the first step to the dissolution of the Romulan Star Empire. A bright spot for the Romulans has been Admiral Taris, who has been organizing the remaining ships into a new fleet. In areas with holes in the chains of command, Taris has been approaching each ship captain personally, and outside observers expect her to have the Romulan military fully operational within 7 months. Federation analysts warn that a strong fleet could quickly overwhelm the weak leaders of the colony worlds, and that the Romulans may soon be under military control. For her part, Taris has not publicly expressed an interest in governing the civilian population, and has ordered the forces under her control to concentrate on relief efforts and defense of the border regions. On Cardassia, the Datopa Council spends most of the year mustering support for a slate of reform measures designed to expand personal freedoms and promote business development. While the population enjoys its newfound liberty and the Aurelian spiritual movement flourishes, many Cardassians are uncertain about this new direction for their world. The Council's task is complicated by Gul Mordrade and his followers, who use the expansions in freedom of speech and assembly to organize rallies promoting a return to the true ways of the Cardassian Union. A task force made up of scientists assigned to the USS Pasteur, commanded by Captain Beverly Crusher. And the Cardassian Ministry of Science announces that it has found a possible cure for Yarman-Fell syndrome. The compound, synthesized from a rare flower that grows in the most remote areas of Cardassia Prime, cannot be replicated. Because of the limited supply of the drug, it may be several years before the treatment has been fully tested and is ready for public use. On Earth, the Federation Supreme Court agrees to hear oral arguments from a group of holonovel publishers and programmers who are seeking to block a class action lawsuit asking for civil rights for holograms. The group hires a retired Starfleet Rear Admiral, Philippa Luva of the Judge Advocate General's office, to lead their case, and she argues that appearing sentient does not automatically mean a hologram is sentient, unless the holograms can be determined to be intelligent and self-aware. The Acts of Cumberland and the Federation Constitution do not offer them full protection. The Soong Foundation argues that without full holometer technology, it cannot bring witnesses to court to speak in their own defense, and that court rules preclude remote testimony in matters such as this. The justices grant the Soong Foundation a delay. The United States Enterprise E returns from a survey of the McAllister C5 Nebula. Captain Data reports that the Enterprise found residual signs of multiple quantum singularities in the area of the nebula that correspond to those used by a Delta Quadrant race known as Species 8472 to cross over from fluidic space. Unfortunately, the properties of the protostellar nebula in which the singularities were found make definitive identification impossible. If these singularities were used by Species 8472, it is the first sign of them near Federation space. 2391 edit rates by Nausicaan pirates continue to disrupt shipping lines on the edges of Federation space. Angry at what they perceive as a lack of response by Starfleet and the Federation government, the Federation Transport Union recommends that its members refuse any official cargoes without adequate protection. This causes a crisis for the Federation government. With so many Starfleet vessels assigned to Romulan and Cardassian relief efforts, the government has been relying heavily on civilian ships for routine deliveries to Federation worlds and protectorates. But the Union's action threatens everything from shipments of replicators to Alpha Centauri, to emergency medical supplies destined for Russia 4. Federation President Nambako meets personally with the leaders of the transport union, but the union refuses to budge on what it says is an essential safety issue. Too many ships, and too many crews have been lost to Nausicaan raids. Presidential aides suggest that Starfleet vessels assigned to exploration and science missions could be rerouted to border defense. But many of those ships are in deep space and it could take them months to return. Starfleet Command reluctantly agrees to pull back from the Klingon-Romulan border and reassign those ships to patrol the shipping routes. Leaders of some of the Romulan colony worlds howl with indignation that the Federation has broken promises of protection. But those voices are silenced after a sharp rebuke from Admiral Terrace. "We are Romulan, we fight our own battles. I would rather see Romulans die with pride in their hearts and swords in their hands instead of mewing for protection like scared younglings." With the Federation withdrawn from the Romulan border, Chancellor Marduk agrees to honor his promise to participate in Federation-mediated peace talks with the Gorn. Representatives from the Klingons, Gorn and Nausicaans converge on Deep Space K7 for the conference, and the Federation sent some of its most celebrated diplomats to facilitate the talks. Initial progress appears promising, but 2 days into the conference an explosive device hidden in a serving cart seriously injures Ambassador Zagozin of the Gorn. The Klingon, Gorn and Nausicaan delegations make plans for immediate departure, but are blocked from leaving the station by Starfleet security, which locks down the station during the hunt for Zagozin's attacker. 2 days after the attack, Jda, a Klingon with ties to extremist groups opposed to Marduk's rule, is found dead. Security officers determine that Jda was killed by a disruptor blast at close range and shoved out an airlock hours after the explosion that injured Zagozin. If Jda's body had not snagged on a piece of the station, it may have been lost. Forensic evidence proves that Jda was the person who planted the explosive that injured the Gorn ambassador, but his killer is not found. Journals left behind in Jda's quarters indicate that his intended target may have been the Federation negotiation team, who all escaped unscathed. After the attack, talks between the Klingons and Gorn break down. The Klingons push their advance into Gorn territory, and the Gorn, mindful of the need to protect their homeworld, move ships away from their outlying territories. King Slathis approaches the Lithians for additional assistance, but most outside analysts believe that the Gorn do not have the spare resources to hire Lithian mercenaries and still pay the prices commanded by the Nausicaans for their support. With the withdrawal of Federation ships from the Klingon-Romulan border, hardliners on the Klingon High Council push for a resumption of the stalled Romulan campaign. Marduk and his followers urge caution, preferring to concentrate on the Gorn war and building up the Klingon defense force to pre-Dominion war levels. Rebuffed by Marduk, Councillor Chimpak gathers ship commanders loyal to his house and the houses of his allies and invades the Zeta Pictoris system. They clash with the Romulan fleet commanded by Admiral Terrace, and the Romulans force the Klingons to retreat. Survivors of the battle report the appearance of highly advanced starships on the Romulan side, but their existence cannot be confirmed. Marduk orders Klingon intelligence to look into the reports in more detail, and the Choice Battle Group is dispatched to investigate. Federation political analysts say that while the Klingon hardliners' campaign in the Zeta Pictoris system was a failure, Jimpak's point was made. If Marduk is unwilling to lead the Klingons into battle, there are others who will do so. The High Council begins to divide between those who are loyal to Marduk and those who would prefer new leadership. Terra's victory in the Zeta Pictoris system rallies the Romulans, who have been desperately seeking a sign of their former glory. Raider 3 is the first to proclaim Terrace as the leader of the Romulan Star Empire, quickly followed by Jenner Prime and more than a dozen other worlds. In an address broadcast throughout the Empire, Terrace says, "I am a military commander, and I would prefer to remain so. The seas of politics are rife with submerged hazards and hidden perils, and a wise person does well to avoid them. But my empire calls and I cannot resist her plea." Terrace calls on the leaders of the colony worlds to meet at Raider 3 to select representatives for a new Romulan Senate and make plans to organize a government and build a new capital. A Federation operative inserted into the fleet that departed Romulan space with Sela in 2386 has reported that Sela and her followers have landed on Makar, an Mac-class planet in the Beta Quadrant with abundant supplies of decalithium and heavy metals. A humanoid race with technology equivalent to Earth's Iron Age inhabited two of Makar's temperate, 7 continents, but Sela sees the population as an additional natural resource, and within weeks her forces have hundreds of Makarans working in the mines. The operative also reports that Sela's ship picked up a signal that was similar to the artificial quantum singularities that the Romulans used to power their warp drives, as well as signs of a massive gravitational field. Sela has dispatched 2 ships to investigate these anomalies. The Kardashian Datapa Council scores a major victory when it concludes negotiations with Ferengi, granting Rom for assistance in rebuilding their industrial complexes. Rom will provide the funding to rebuild factories, design houses and replication facilities, as well as returning several valuable Javanite artifacts sacred to followers of the Orleans, to the Kardashian Ministry of Culture. In return, Rom receives exclusive trade agreements for Kardashian trade goods once the factories reopen. While Rom is mocked by many Ferengi for his lack of lobes when it comes to business, if the deal succeeds it could be one of the most lucrative arrangements in recent memory, on Earth. The Federation Supreme Court rules in favor of Philippa Louva and the Holonaval publishers and programmers she represents, saying that the Acts of Cumberland would not apply to non-sentient holographic or artificial lithic forms. They returned the Soong Foundation's class action suit to a lower court to determine what defines sentience in a legal sense. Not content with pursuing its agenda in the courts, the Soong Foundation launches a campaign to lobby Federation worlds to add rights for artificial life forms to the Federation Constitution, responding to the possibility of Species 8472 appearing in Federation space. Starfleet Command assigns a task force to investigate any possible appearances of the race. A skilled team of scientists, diplomats and security experts will be looking into any signs that the species is in the Alpha Quadrant and formulating possible plans of action. As a start to the research, the team is conducting extensive interviews of the crew of the Enterprise E, which found the anomalies in the McAllister C5 Nebula, and former crew members of Voyager, which is the only Starfleet ship known to have definitive contact with the mysterious aliens, and, citing the success of the extremely diverse crews of the United States' Titan and her sister ships. Starfleet assigns a committee to consider expanding the admission standards at Starfleet Academy, to provide more opportunities for races that are formally aligned with the Federation but are not full member worlds. Not everyone knows a Starfleet captain and can get a personal recommendation, said spokesperson Marie Durand. That DOESN? Mean they wouldn't be fine officers. 2392 Edit News of the race for Federation President dominates news nets for much of the year. President Nambako declines to run again, stating that while she didn't feel right leaving office during the Romulan crisis, "I've been here too long. We need new blood and new ideas." The popular Bako doesn't endorse a successor, throwing the field open to dozens of potential candidates. Jawed Maz of Trill is frequently mentioned by political commentators, as are Federation councillors Sorna Vulcan and Kevin Steiner of Terra Nova. Candidates from Bajor, Andoria and Soria are seen as outside choices. However, Sorn and Sherry Vritajathan of Andoria never become formal candidates and Steiner abandons his campaign 2 months before the election after his ties to the Orion Syndicate are exposed by the Federation News Service. The remaining hopefuls engage in a fierce campaign in which top issues are to the Kardashians and Romulans, the increasing conflicts with the Klingon Empire and whether Starfleet should be expanded to respond to the increasing threats to Federation citizens. Ultimately, Enoch Okuk of Soria is elected in a close vote over Jawed Maz, with Badran Shadana in third place. Okuk, the first Sorian ever to hold the Federation presidency, begins his term by offering Maz and Shad places in his cabinet in an effort to promote unity among supporters of his competitors. Okuk's first state trip takes him to Cestus III, where the Klingon Empire has agreed to a new round of Federation-moderated talks aimed at ending their war with the Gorn. While the Federation diplomatic team, led by Alexander Roshenko, hopes that a successful ceasefire agreement will open the door to expand the summit to deal with Klingon Federation trade and defense agreements that are set to expire in 2394. It quickly becomes obvious that neither the Klingons nor the Gorn are willing to budge on their demands. 3 weeks into the talks, representatives for the Klingons and Gorn are still heckling over the official agenda for negotiations. And even a personal appeal to Chancellor Marduk by Federation Ambassador Werfes failed to speed up the process. The Federation Council meets in emergency session to debate of possible incentives the Federation could offer the Gorn and Klingons, but all peace efforts collapse on stardate 69,259-56 when a Gorn and Nausicaan fleet attacks the Klingon world of Ogat. Fighting rages around Ogat for more than 2 weeks before Klingon defense forces push the Gorn and Nausicans out of the system. The Klingons denounce the attack as dishonorable and Marduk formally pulls the Empire out of all peace negotiations. Klingon and Gorn ships now attack one another on sight, and when the United States' Montana tries to intervene in one skirmish, it is heavily damaged by Klingon disruptor fire. Hardliners on the Klingon High Council, led by Ch'mpok, demand even more aggressive action against the Gorn, calling for an invasion into the Gorn hegemony. When Marduk counsels caution, preferring to keep the Gorn out of Klingon space until a new fleet of warships can be launched, Ch'mpok denounces him as a weak old man, hiding in his bed instead of meeting all challengers on the field of battle. Federation political analysts expect the schism on the High Council to come to a head some time in the next 3 years, and look with concern at the growing support for Ch'mpok and his hawk-like agenda. One of the major houses openly supporting Ch'mpok is the House of Torg, a former ally of the House of Duras. In fact, Torg's adopted heir, Jarad, is the son of Lursa. Duras' sister and an open foe of the Federation who was killed attacking the Enterprise in 2371. Jarad, who was on Ogat when it was attacked by the Gorn, survives the battle and enters training with the Klingon Defense Force on stardate 69,637-18. In Cardassia Prime, the Dotapa Council enacts a series of reform measures designed to promote population growth and economic stability. Benefits are offered to families with more than one child, and thousands of soldiers displaced when the Cardassian military was disbanded are provided with retraining and placement into Cardassia's burgeoning civilian industries. Many former military officers end up employed by Gul Mardrade in his mining interests on Septimus. Mardrade's mines are operating at such a high capacity that he begins exporting Kalandite and Iridium through Ferengi brokers. His first major buyer is the Romulans, who are desperate to rebuild ships and expand colonies and need additional resources. One of the Romulans' construction projects is Rihan. A new capital city being constructed on Raider 3. The first building completed is used to house meetings of the Romulan Colonial Organizational Committee, which was formed under the directions of Admiral Taris. The committee lays some initial groundwork for a new government, but is beset by the infighting and factionalization that has plagued the Romulans since the destruction of their homeworld. A group of moderates suggests that the Romulans need a single figure to focus their energies, and cites historical records of Romulan rulers, reminders of Tanatra declaring herself Empress of a breakaway state trouble some members of the committee. But Admiral Taris indicates that she would support the revival of the monarchy. However, Taris says that any move to crown a ruler must be made by the Romulan people. 2393 added the rapid rise of a new chancellor for the Klingon High Council has thrown the Empire's relations with the Federation and other major powers into doubt. Whether you loved or hated Marduk, he was a known quantity, said Starfleet spokesperson Commander Marie Durand. We simply don't know enough about Ch'mpok. Strained relations between the Federation and the Klingon Empire have made gathering detailed information about the current political situation on Countess difficult. The task is complicated by the fact that one of Ch'mpok's first acts was to bar the Federation's ambassador from the Great Hall. Ambassador Worf is a member of the House of Marduk and was one of Marduk's staunchest supporters. What is known is that tensions had been rising between Marduk and Ch'mpok for some time. Ch'mpok and his followers on the council accused Marduk of being a weak leader and a puppet for Federation interests. They questioned his close ties to Worf, as well as Marduk's willingness to negotiate with the Gorn. In return, Marduk's supporters accused Ch'mpok of acting dishonorably and undermining the actions of Marduk and the Klingon Defense Force during a time of war. On stardate 70,437.47, during a debate over whether to send more ships to fight the Gorn, tensions rose to a boiling point. Infuriated by Ch'mpok's jibes and threats, Marduk expels Ch'mpok from the High Council and orders his lands and titles seized. The House of Ch'mpok would be dissolved. Marduk's decree only serves to further divide the council between followers of Marduk and Champak, and both sides begin preparing for war. Fighting breaks out between the groups in the streets of Kaunas, and reports of ship crews splitting into factions begin filtering back to Klingon command. Remembering the damage caused by the civil war after Chancellor Kmpik's death, Marduk tells advisors that he is going to try to find a resolution with Champak that will end the conflict. On stardate 70,669.86, he orders Champak to meet with him at the Great Hall. Marduk orders his bodyguards, the Yen Islith, to guard the doors and allow no one to disturb them. 2 hours later, Champak opens the doors of the council chamber and announces that Marduk is dead, and that he is now Chancellor of the Klingon Empire. Drex, son of Marduk, challenges Champak, accusing him of murdering Marduk in dishonorable combat. However, Drex is seen by most as callow and unworthy of taking up his father's mantle. Vat. The Arbiter of Succession rejects his claim. Undaunted, Drex claims the right of vengeance and challenges Champak to combat. Drex is severely injured in the ensuing battle, but Champak declines to kill him. Other challengers to Champak's claim quickly fade away, and his claim to the position of Chancellor is ratified by the High Council. The regime change in the Klingon Empire is a major cause for concern for the Federation, and President Okul recalls Ambassador Worf to Earth for consultations. Ultimately, the Federation decides to take a wait-and-see approach, welcoming Champak and inviting him to meet with the Federation at his earliest convenience. Champak sends word through an intermediary that while he appreciates Okul's offer, affairs on the homeworld will keep him occupied for some time. Happier news for the Federation is the formal admission of Bajor and Tama Primate full members. The long process of acclimating the planet's economies and populations to life in the Federation begins. Although this process is eased somewhat in Bajor's case because of the close ties Bajor has had with the Federation since the end of the Kardashian occupation in 2369, one notable exception to the conversion is Quark's Bar, Grill, Gaming House, Holosuite Arcade, Gift Shop and Embassy on Deep Space Nine. As a formal embassy for the Ferengi Alliance, it's business as usual at Quark's. Being the best place for free trade in the Bajor sector brings a significant increase in traffic to Quark's, and the owner is said to be in the market for a moon. In one of their first ventures at Federation citizens, the children of Tama work with Starfleet to open a new linguistic research facility on Eladril. 4. Dathon and Picard, at Eladril. Picard, his heart open, said co-director Meltha at the facility's dedication. While doing a stellar survey near 2466 p.m., the United States' Stargazer A is contacted by an entity claiming to be from the Metron Consortium. If this being's claim was correct, it would be the first contact the Federation has had with the Metron since 2267. The being agreed to tour the ship, met with Captain Roma Giordano, and said that while the younger races were still unready for contact, they have made progress. The legal fight for civil rights for artificial life-form hits a snag over the hologram known as Moriarty. Alerted to its existence in a Starfleet computer, the Soong Foundation sues to have the program released into its custody. Attorneys for Starfleet argue that Moriarty and his companion are a security risk, and that the program's attempt to take over the United States' Enterprise in 2369 allows Starfleet to keep it in indefinite custody to protect the public. That's just imprisonment without a trial, argues Alyssa Cogley-Shaw, lead attorney for the Soong Foundation. Since when did Starfleet turn into the Obsidian Order? The Kardashians take a major step towards self-sufficiency when the Tapa Council member Nadama Lung strikes an agreement with Reman leader General Lorix. Lorix agrees to sell dilithium and heavy metal ores to the Kardashians, which allows them to drastically expand their production of ships and warp drives by the end of the year. The Kardashians are using Ferengi brokers to sell ships including the Type V commercial laboratory throughout the Alpha Quadrant. The increase in ship production leads to more commercial traffic in and out of the Septimus system, where Gulmordrade owns several large mining operations, claiming that his mines have been attacked by raiders and that the Kardashian Defense Force cannot adequately protect Kardashian citizens. Mordrade contacts Lemedyukin, leader of the Jem'Hadar in the Alpha Quadrant. Lamadukin sends troops to protect Modrade's mines over the protests of the Kardashian government, which sees the presence of the Jem'Hadar as a threat. Modrade argues that hiring private security to protect his property and employees is his right, as a business owner. And that if the Jem'Hadar do not break laws or threaten Kardashian citizens, it is none of the Datopo Council's concern. In Romulan space, the Romulan Colonial Organization Committee continues the work of forming a new Romulan government. Several legislative sessions are interrupted by arguments between General Taras and General Diabok about what the role of the Romulan military should be. Diabok sways a portion of the RCOC with his argument that far-flung areas of the Empire, particularly the areas near Klingon space, should be sacrificed in the short term to strengthen the position of what are now the Romulan core worlds. But Taras says that it is their duty to keep fighting for every world. The debate takes up much of the later part of the year for the RCOC, but no decision is reached.